Good evening and welcome to Scott Bailey Hairdressing. We're a little bit later than what we had planned, but hopefully you're with us live tonight. Thank you so much for last week, all the correspondence that we had. Hopefully you'll enjoy tonight's haircut that we're going to do here in the salon tonight. Last week we did a lady's haircut. Tonight we're going to do a gentleman's haircut. Let me introduce you to my wonderful model Ian and good friend. Let's give it a little wave. Okay, so as I said last week, it's very important that when you talk about hair, tonight obviously we'll be looking at education, products, exclusively tonight, again sponsored by Muck Hair Care from Australia. Nice to see if you're in on us tonight, especially Alan. Also, like to say a big good evening to all the local people I know they're watching tonight. Our big mate, nice to see you, and your lovely partner as well. Tonight obviously is very important because we'll be talking about the technical part of what hair's all about in terms of this haircut, because it'll be very different to the haircut from last week. Also, we'll be sharing other tricks tonight with the razor blade. We'll be working with the clippers. We'll even be working with blow drying, waxing to the hair again for those of you that didn't see last week. We'll also be going back to the 1950s, doing a little bit of scissor over comb, which is always a traditional way of cutting, which of course I do really love that and prefer it. It looks very natural. Then we'll come in with a clipper cut afterwards. But also it's a question of hand positioning, body positioning, the way that you stand and then feel the cut, which again is very important as a hairdresser. Okay, so let's start with where it starts at the beginning of any haircut, and that's the choice of product. We're going to use tonight a mousse, which in this case is a Muck blowout mousse, which again, of course, as I said last week, you put it into a glass, it turns into conditioner, which again, hair I tend to think of as being a fabric. So what we'll do is we'll apply the product. That helps me to see the natural fall, which again is very important because as you're doing a haircut, you want to be able to see the natural fall and see how a haircut is progressing. So then the guest also can see that as you're doing the cut. So there's our first product tonight. So again, as I said last week, it's very important you literally apply the product, I feel, which is an important way of doing this, to apply it with the comb. A lot of people tend to like theatre, which again, hairdressing is theatre, it's theatrical. We're not actors, we're all real people, but coming out into a hairdressing salon is a stage, and I always tend to think of it as every haircut is a canvas, and you're creating some magic. The scissors are an extension of what your paintbrush is and the way that you conduct the style when it's done. Now the nice thing about using a sculpting foam, also in this case a blowout mousse, is that when you do your sectioning, which I tend to think sectioning's got to be really clean, which those of you that I teach, which I know will be watching tonight because I know you were on it sort of last week watching, you'll know that if you get a really untidy section, you'll end up being a really untidy hairdresser, as I was always taught by my teachers. Now what we're going to do is just going to go through the bones in the skull again, which are very important because they're going to be the guidelines for this haircut. So we're going to start with the recession over here. We're going to be going through the parietal ridge, again onto the apex, the upper occipital bone, the occipital bone, lower occipital bone, the mastoid process, which is behind the ear, and the nape. So the first part of this will be a horseshoe section, which you tend to find that, again, this subdivides the haircut from one part to the other. And it's just a great way of halving the haircut, so then you're in a position where you can actually see what you're doing in the bottom half and then working to the top. You'll see now I'm using the finer edge of the comb, which again is really important because with doing that you're able to then get the cleanness of the line. Just ask my dad just to come around to the other side, then you'll see just how clean that line's looking now, which is really important. So again, the matching up part is what it's all about. You have to match this up and think of the shape of a horseshoe section. And then again, you can start any way you wish on this. I generally tend to start from the back because as you work from the back, that gets the balance in the cut. You're able to then do one side, which everybody has a weak side. I tend to find that the right side is my weak side, so I'll start with the left and then try and correct it if I need to. So an easy way to remember this, last week we went round the head, which you saw it looked like a spider's sort of shape of a body. This time we're going to be using square sections. The idea of the square sections is it's a moving guide. The moving guide then creates the shape, which we're then going to create a little bit of weight with that also. Okay, let's come around to the other side and then you'll see where we're going. So as we go through the hair, we'll be literally taking section by section. What this does now is it will be stamping the shape into the cut to begin with. A bit like when you're laying bricks in a house. It creates the orange bricks, well, sorry, the blue bricks before the orange go on the top. We'll then be, once we've been round here with the scissors, we'll then go through the scissors again, doing the weight line through this section. We'll then bring the razor into the top to then cut the section on the top of the hair, and then blow dry with products and then personalise afterwards. Now, an easy way to remember on this part is half the hair, back of the head, will literally then be telling you that we're going obviously this way around, which is to the left. So my thumb is going to dictate which way we're going this way, the other side will dictating to go that way. The idea being that the hand dictates which shape we're going to, so we don't have to bend all over the head. Now we're hoping this part will take probably about 15 minutes to do this part of the hair. We'll then move on probably 25 minutes for the cut, which is wet, for those of you that need to sort of nip out and get yourselves some dinner or bath your children. We're looking to complete the cut within the next hour. So I know some people nip in and nip out. Again, the most important part of this is going to the second knuckle on the fingers. Okay, that's just there. If you go past that, you're likely to cut yourself or take too much off. Plus also it gives you the ability to be able to move your hand if you want to, so you can create a shape that's... Okay, now we're moving round, going to 7 o'clock. You see I'm using large scissors tonight. These are 8.5-inch blades. Most people generally tend to use 4.5-inch blades. That's in honour of my gents barber teacher that had it at, as it was, Southfields College many years ago, back in 1987. I always wondered why I used large scissors, but they were traditionally used as barbers back in the 60s, so I felt that that's what I wanted. It works really well on this technique, which is nice. So again, we're just coming around the sides now to the ear. Generally tend to do a bit of cross-checking. That's when you go around the opposite way when you get to the back of the ear. You see I'm not moving the angles at all. Everything's all nice and clean. Coming into the back of the ear. BT's working well tonight. We're not on talk. BT's doing us proud, for those of us that were on last week. It's good on modern technology. So you see now, literally just sort of close up, you can see where we're going with this. Being careful not to cut the ears, because again, it's an important instrument in terms of checking the balance of a haircut. So just as I come up to the back of the ears now, I'm going to just cross check it. So you can see now, if you come around this part here, let's just have a little look, you can see the shape coming through. So we're going quite tight to a little bit of weight through the top. Now we'll just cross check the opposite way and just make sure that everything's all nice and clean, which is clean enough for me. It's almost like doing a hairdressing exam. It's great. Many years ago when we were in London, down in Mayfair, I was working for Tony and Guy. I learnt a lot of these tricks, and also working for Paul Mitchell with the Vidal Sassoon training program. I know DJ's quite popular on Facebook, you sort of see him a lot, and it's good to remember those people in honour of them that have taught me to do hair. I feel that it's important to approach any haircut you do with nice clean sections, nice clean lines, the way I'm standing, my body position, hand position, going down to the second knuckle, it's all clean and cleanliness, keeping the haircut to the best you can keep it. I'm sure a few of you will be thinking now, those scissors move rather quickly, but as I said last week, practice makes perfect, and that's what it's all about. Just keeping everything tidy. So you can see now we're working towards the front section. Just keeping everything nice and clean. Exaggerating the sections at 45 degrees. That again just keeps it all nice and clean. As you can see with Ian's wonderful blonde hair that we're working with tonight, you can really sort of see where we're going with this. And if this wasn't cut at the right angle, what we'd be getting now is lines all over it. So I use this technique because it's good for discipline on a side view, to make sure that everything sits nice. Remember, we'll be cleaning around the ears later we'll be doing the sideburns later.
Don't forget, Scott, it's not grey, it's Arctic blonde.
That's right, that's correct. So now we can see coming through the first side. Now we're just going to move to the second side. All this will be cleaned up later through here, just so everybody's clear on that we're now going to change the second side, bring the weight in, then we'll clean that in later when we're scissor over combing. Let's just bring Dad around to the side. If you'd like to come around this side, it sounds a bit better than come over here. Right, so now the hand goes over, so obviously we've now gone over this way. What we're doing is something called palm to palm cutting. So as long as you can remember your hands going together, it's really important you can actually see on palm to palm. So you just have to discipline your fingers to where you're going with them. So obviously the thumb is the one that leads, which again brings it round. See, we've got a lot of curls to play with just round here. So angling the finger, most people tend, but of course it's in reverse. So what you would have done earlier that way, you're now doing that way. So this sort of catches a few people out. Again, if you can just film me, Dad, for a second, you can see that my body position is really square on, so I'm not really sort of bending my back or anything. So you just got to keep nice. Thank you. So you can sort of see where we're going. Just laughing in the mirror. But you can see the idea is I'm not sort of making myself hunched in any way, so it just sort of keeps everything nice and clean and tidy. So as I said earlier on, that the body positioning is very important. So again, we're coming to that checkpoint. Tend to think of sections on the hair as quadrants. If you put a square on the top, well, cross on the top of the hair, it creates 4 squares. So if I can just show you the old hot cross bun section when you used to do colours, think of anywhere in those 4 areas. It's almost like Zoltan. You can actually think of those 4 areas as a quadrant. So we're coming now to the end of the first quadrant, and that will then create the shape. So we can see if the balance is right. So I'm just going to go through the opposite way. Just check that balance, if there's any longer bits coming through. Okay, so now we'll move on. Coming through this way, that's it. As you can see the muck nicely on there for our friends in Australia. Also big evenings also to Kate Howard. I'm guessing that she'll be on tonight from Locks Hairdressing. Another one of my previous students that I've taught. I know there'll be a few of my pupils on tonight, so good evening. I'll show you. This brings it all back for you, all these sections. I know some people did try the razor last week after watching the feed. So again, don't be afraid to try something different. Ian said to me tonight, he said, don't be scared to go too short, don't be scared to do this, don't be scared to do that. It's a question of breaking rules and trying something different and trying something new. If you don't section hair this way, if you do not do palm to palm cutting, try it. Who knows, you might like it. But it's just a question of just breaking a few rules and trying something new. I mean, I still learn now. I said that last week. I'm not afraid to learn anything. And you know, we looked at things last week, the lighting, this, that, and the other. I was learning from what people were saying. So the example I'm giving you there is that you're never too old to learn. Make sure you film my young side. That's it. Thanks. That's brilliant. So again, it's a question of not being frightened to try something different, and I think you'll get some good results. So we've now done both sides on scissor over comb, well, scissoring through the comb I should say, taking sections. Now we're going to repeat the process again. What you tend to find is on here you have a weight line through the section of the hair that's here. Obviously if you don't cut that off, what you get is a nice step. So in order to eliminate that, it's good just to take that weight line off. So we'll take that off and then we'll come through the top, which then we'll get the razor blade out and it gets a bit more interesting. So let's go back round to the other side and repeat the process. So again, what we're looking for is where we've got the previous cut, which is here, we're now going to take this weight out. So this also shows us the previous haircut, what the previous person did, which is interesting when you sort of go through the map of the hair. So I always tend to sort of really try and stamp the shape in it and keep it strong rather than moving around. Also, you have to be careful of drag, so don't pull it back too much, just try and keep it central, which again just keeps things nice and clean. If I cannot emphasize enough the cleanliness. You see as this is dropping tonight, it's really clean, bit of wind simulation there. It just shows you how things sit better. And again, the other thing you've got to remember is with this is to pull the fingers out. A lot of people tend to follow the contour of the head, which is okay, but I think what you need to do is just leave a little bit of weight to begin with. This technique also is used on a lady, which you'll see when we do Kirsty's hair, hopefully next week or the week after. You'll see that on a short lady's haircut that there'll be a similarity in the technique as well. The difference there will be, talking about last week, the protractor, how it moves around, you'll see the shape change and how you can adapt this haircut into many different ways. Okay, let's come round to the side and we'll have a little look at what's happening. So now we're coming through to the other side, again matching up the weight. So I predict in about 10 minutes time we'll have finished the wet cut part, and we'll be then going into the blow dry, which again, once we've done the blow dry, we'll then go into personalisation and share with you how the products from Muck can work better. So in my clientele, I have about 40% of my clients are gentlemen that come in, 60% ladies. Some of those people have been with me for probably the best part of 23 years, some 25. We only discovered this the other day because of course next year I celebrate 30 years of hairdressing, which is incredible to where the time's gone. But you pick up the tricks along the way, and I always think of it as a palette, like an artist works with colour, and then you're looking to take those tricks off a palette and use. So say I'd use a technique from another system and put it into the cut. It's whatever works for you the best. So you have to think of what is the best thing to use. We'll change the scissors now, and we'll go down to some 7-inch blades. The idea being now I'm going to do a rounded layer on the top, but the difference with this is I'm going to chip the line out, which means I'm going to cut into the hair and give it a very jagged edge. So as you go normally like this, through the top and then point cut in there, the difference being now I'm going to use a stroking technique. So pulling it out, watching the drag, and then in with the scissors. Some of you will have seen this before. This is my party piece on stage. Some of you will have not have seen this before. What it does is it gives the effect of a razor blade, because if you remember, we're going through the top in a moment where we'll be using a razor blade to create the shape. So we want some natural movement in this. So the best way in order to do it is to create it with the tip of the blade. Now the way you achieve it is using the edge of the blade, so it opens and closes, but also in a stroking motion. So as we're coming in slowly, you can see the fingers are bending to stop them from being obviously sliced by the blade, and then as you can see I'm literally just chipping that off, and as that's coming off it then creates a natural effect. This is brilliant for curly hair and straight, but you can really see that effect coming through there now. It sits well with the swirl, the crown. Let's come around to the other side. That's it. Thank you. So now, as we come through to this side, we switch the hand over and coming from the top. So you can see again, it's down to the second knuckle. The discipline there is literally just on the second knuckle. So again, you're not going too deep and you're keeping the shape really strong. But you can see that the hair is starting to react, it's starting to move. Again, with the product in the Blowout Mousse by Muck, you can really see that shape start to move around here. I always tend to think of when hair's wet, what it would look like when the guest steps out of a swimming pool when they're on holiday. People tend to think of it as how it looks when it's dry, but I'll visualise the cut obviously when it's dry and finished, but also how it would look when the guest goes away and they're able to do it themselves. But that's what I always think, with us being in the holiday period, a lot of people tend to say, I just want it so it's easy, so I can just literally just get in the pool and get out the pool, and it's just something dead simple to fall into place. So you can see now with a bit of wind simulation, just from the back there, you can sort of see how it just sits on the hair. It goes with the swirl quite nicely, the crown. So now we'll bring the razor blade into the game. Now this is quite interesting, because if you look at this haircut, it's a haircut of 2 parts on the top. What you have to try and think of is that the top part of the hair is like the spokes in a wheel, well, spokes in a bicycle wheel. Everybody cuts hair like this, okay, this sort of way, which is fine, no problem at all. I like to challenge myself with something different. The technique here, obviously, the hair grows naturally forward. We want to encourage the hair to grow forward, but also to give it shape. So we're going to go in sections, channels. And what we're going to do with that is, on the sections of the bike wheel, you think of it as time. So we'll start at 9 o'clock, end at 12, then we'll go to the other side of the head and go from 12 to 3. So if that translates now onto the head, so you can see, you'll be thinking, what's all that about? It will move round. So this will be 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. 1, 2, 3. So that's how it works. Now, if we wanted to create the shape to go longer at the front, we'd then just literally get the razor and pull it up. If we want it to be shorter, we bend it towards the front of the fringe. So we'll now do the cut. So literally just pull it up. Make sure we've got no drag. We're looking for the previous guide from the previous cut. All we're going to do now is just come in, glide the razor through, and then all it does then is creates the shape. So you can hear that cutting. If you wanted to give it more of a softer look, just literally, it's quite similar technique in terms of the finger positioning of how the fingers were on the previous way of cutting with a pair of scissors. So I'm now thinking about the time. I'm going to 10 o'clock, which will give me the shape. I'm now chipping in it to give it more of a softer look. Again, anybody who's losing hair, this is a great technique, because the angle of the blade as it cuts will make the hair go wider, which again makes it look all of a sudden as if the guest has got more hair. So you may want to think about that. For those of you that are just thinking to yourselves, I'd like to try this tomorrow, that's fine also. But just make sure you take a little amount off. And remember, when you're combing, if you've got one of these carving combs, to remember to comb with the right end. And don't do what I did the first time and take a chunk of the hair out. But we've all made little mistakes. So now as we go like this, we can really start to see that shape coming through, and it gives us a real jagged edge. So because the hair naturally grows forward, the beautiful thing is you can really see that shape now starting to take shape. Again, if it was cut the other way, which we'll cross-check the conventional way, you'll find it'll be quite heavy on the top. So I find just doing this, it's all of a sudden starting to create a natural shape. So let's just come around to the side with the camera and you can see. Do a quick switch. So, that's it. Right, so now we're going to go backwards on the top, so you can see we've got all that shape coming through nicely. Now we're going to go backwards on the top. So again, coming towards the end of the relationship of the haircut in a minute before we go into blow drying. Again, thinking about the time as we're coming round. So we're now aiming towards 1 o'clock. So that just gives us more shape. And now we're going, obviously it pivots all off the crown, everything all pivots off the crown. Again, you'll be able to use this video as a reference and replay it back and sort of think to yourselves, well, I really like that technique. Some salon owners that I've taught in the past, they actually use this on their guests, and they rang me up the next day and said, I really like that technique, Scott, it really worked, it changed the way I cut hair. Right, so now we can sort of see where we're going with it. It's creating a lovely little shape. So, now we're going to go through the opposite way. Because we need to cross-check. So let's get my favourite scissors. Every hairdresser has their favourite scissors. I have mine.